What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. And first and foremost, before we get started with today's video, make sure y'all hit that subscribe button. Make sure you click that post notification bell so you'll know whenever I put out any new content, go live, all the good things like that. And this is actually going to be the first of 3 straight days that I plan to upload. I plan to obviously put this video out today. I plan to put another out tomorrow, and then I plan to put one out Thursday because we actually have football this week. The Falcons play a game this week, a preseason game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Friday. So it is preseason. I know there are some people who do not really care about preseason. That's totally fine. But if you do, like me, because listen, I'm a football junkie and I'm going to take football where I can get it any day of the week. So without a doubt, yes, I'm very excited to at least see the Falcons out on the field in preseason, even if it is just third or fourth string. At the end of the day, still excited. We'll talk about that later in the week. But I want to talk about a guy today who I feel like could be very important to just how successful the Falcons defense is this year, especially with his development. And I'm talking about our second round pick from the 2024 draft, Ruke Orhorhoro. Drafted 35th overall in the 2024 NFL draft, the Falcons selected Orhorhoro out of Clemson. The Falcons have obviously had their fair share of Clemson picks and players whose alma mater is Clemson who have played on the Falcons right now. Obviously, you have A.J. Terrell. We have Bradley Pinion. Grady Jarrett played at Clemson. I mean, hell, we drafted Vic Beasley, and he came out of Clemson. That didn't work out. But the Falcons have really had a nod for drafting Clemson players throughout their entire existence. That has really kind of been where the Falcons have gotten their pipeline from, especially when you talk about players on the defensive side of the ball. And they look for Ruke Orhorhoro to be another one of these players that can continue that pipeline and hopefully develop into a solid player for us. But especially with Grady Jarrett, who we just mentioned, leaving this offseason after a 10-year career here, we know that creates a big hole. That creates a big hole in leadership, but that also creates a big hole in on-the-field production. Because even though Grady Jarrett was never a stats guy, Grady Jarrett was always back there disrupting the backfield. He was always back there. He was applying pressure. He was taking the running back down. Grady Jarrett was always making his presence known. And now with that going, we're going to need some guys to step up. And we have a lot of young guys on this defense. We have Zach Harrison, who's entering his 3rd year and is also in a big make-it-or-break-it year. We have Arnold Ebiketie, who has kind of been here for a couple years, coming off the edge. And this is a contract year for him. And he's a guy who he really has to put it together consistently for a full year. We have Brandon Doros, who was also drafted in the 2024 draft, who is entering year 2, and it seems as if the Falcons defensive coaching staff may have expectations of some of the stuff he could contribute. We also obviously drafted Jalen Walker, drafted James Pierce Jr., and even, going beyond this front 7, we've drafted guys like Xavier Watts, Billy Bowman Jr. just in this last draft. But I feel like for Ruke Orhorhoro, it's especially important because, number one, first and foremost, this guy was drafted in the high 2nd round, and we traded up for him. You really think about it, that late 1st round, early 2nd round, it's almost in a way interchangeable. The only, there are differences obviously in their contract structure, but you have a lot of late 1st round talent that falls into the 2nd round of the draft and was on the board when the Falcons selected Ruke Orhorhoro. So the Falcons obviously have to have some high expectations of what Ruke Orhorhoro can do. Now, when Ruke Orhorhoro played last year, and he did not play much, but when he did play, he was always out there, and you saw the signs of potential from him. You saw in the Thursday night game versus Tampa, early in the year. You saw at points him out on the field, and he was getting in the backfield some. It wasn't a whole lot, especially considering that he really was on a snap count, and he was also injured a part of the year. And that's really the other thing about the Falcons draft class from 2024, is for a lot of these guys this year, this is going to be a big prove year. Obviously, Michael Penix, who we saw 3 games from last year, and we've already talked about. But you talk about Braylon Trice, who's pretty much going to be a rookie this year. You're talking about Brandon Dorless, who the Falcons have expectations for. There is a lot that is riding on some of these guys, but Ruke Orhorhoro is almost one of these situations where he really does have to show a lot of signs of growth this year, because the spot that he is playing in the Falcons defense, he's playing in the interior. And one thing that I'm always going to say, and I've always believed, is that in order to be successful in the NFL, you obviously have to have the quarterback. You do have to have an edge rusher. But that interior guy is also very, very important. Now, Ruke Orhorhoro is not necessarily... He's 6'4", 295. So, he is tall. He's definitely bigger than Grady Jarrett in a sense. He's 295 for the position that he is playing. I would maybe have liked to see him add on an extra few pounds, because I truly do believe that the defensive interior, it's not all about stats, but it's all about disruption. And that is what we really have to look for out of Ruke Orhorhoro this year. And the disruption is largely in a way going to come from really just how big you are and how much you can win those battles in the trenches. And that is what we're really relying on Ruke Orhorhoro to do now. We're not relying on him to be a big stat guy, but we are relying on him to essentially free up those lanes. Because I really believe in all that the Falcons did this offseason, mainly through the draft and addressing the defense. The one thing that I really feel that it does feel like the Falcons did not address, and maybe they did downgrade at in a way, is obviously the interior. Now, we did sign Morgan Fox this offseason, who it sounds like will be a part of the starting rotation. But when you lose a guy like Grady Jarrett, once again, it is a very big loss. And David Onyemata is still here. But it's about time that we really start phasing him out. You cannot really rely on David Onyemata to bring you the spark in that interior. You got to rely on some of these young guys. And Ruke Orhorhoro is the top name that I am looking at that we're going to need impact from. And that is where I also say the Falcons' new defensive line coach, Nate Ollie, he is going to be very important to the development of Ruke Orhorhoro. Now, Ruke is really in many ways a project. Coming out of Clemson, he had a very impressive combine, and he is an athlete. Let's face it, Ruke Orhorhoro is an athlete. He is very, it's almost in a sense, he had a very fast 40, and, he really wowed a lot of people, and that is why he did get drafted so high. There really wasn't a whole lot on the field that was really in a way pure about him or specific to what he can be. He's really a wild card. That is why development with Ruke is going to be key and is another job of this Falcons coaching staff under defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich to develop Ruke Orhorhoro into a solid player so that he can help the Falcons in 2025, because the spot that he is playing is going to be one of the most critical spots. And, the success of a defense can really depend on how much pressure that interior is applying and how much disruption they're causing. And some other news, the Falcons did sign right tackle Kaleb McGary to a contract extension on Monday. McGary signed a 2-year, $30 million contract extension, which I believe will now lock him into the Falcons through the end of the 2027 season. And this is important because This is now Michael Penix's blindsided. And obviously you want to keep Michael Penix protected. And Kaleb McGary is really one of these players that it's really polarizing. It's either you like his development and you are willing to give him another shot, you know, in another contract and a few more years of that trust, or you definitely have your question marks about it. And both sides are fair to the conversation. But what I will say is, and I think you got to praise Kaleb McGary for this, after really the first 3 years he had, his first 3 years in the league were pretty rough. And he showed development, but it didn't look like he was going anywhere. He looked like he was well on his way to being a bust. He actually had his 5th-year option decline, but then in 2022, he was really able to step up under Arthur Smith and really under, you know, the development of that offensive line. And, you know, it's kind of the similar situation we're in with the defensive line now that we were with the offensive line a couple years ago. And Arthur Smith, to his credit, was able to develop a lot of players on this offensive line. He took Chris Lindstrom to the next level, and he did the same with Kaleb McGary. So the fact that, you know, he was able to get a 3rd contract for him personally, you know, I think you got to be proud of him because he has grown as a player, and you have to admit that. But it is definitely, I think, a move to give a little bit more cap flexibility also heading into the season that is getting ready to start before we know it in just a few weeks. If the Falcons maybe want to go and make a last-minute move. But the Falcons do extend Kaleb McGary 2 years, $30 million. Not necessarily, I mean, look, these contracts are going up, so when you honestly look at about where it is, it's pretty close to market value. And, you know, you would definitely rather get these extensions done sooner rather than later. With that being said, appreciate everyone for watching. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure you hit like, post notification bell. I will see you all in the next one, and so long, everybody.